I'm back. Hello, everybody. This is Carmen Rojas with the Rojas Consulting Group, and you are joining us for a special four-part series on entrepreneurship and finance that we are doing with the very lovely and talented Miss Stephanie Sims. So I have just a few housekeeping things that I want to run through briefly, and then we are going to get into this for real. So real quick, just want to do a couple special thanks to a few sponsors out there. Mr. Mike Alton with Social Media Hat. He is offering blog coaching services for businesses who would like some help with that. And so we'll be posting a link to him, but he is a sponsor of our show today. So we definitely want to say thank you to Mr. Mike Alton and the Social Media Hat. Also,
Are you there, Carmen?
can you hear me?
Yep, we got you.
Okay, I'm sorry. I don't know what happened. That was interesting. Never a dull moment. Alrighty then. So where did I drop out? Was I thanking Mike?
You finished thanking Mike, I think.
I finished thanking Mike. Okay. So next, the person I need to thank is Mr. Dennis Deuce with Gambach Me, and he put together these beautiful overlays that you see all around us. So we want to thank him so very much for working on that, and encourage you, if you would like some help with your, customizing your HOA and doing beautiful artwork like this, that you give Dennis Deuce a call or look for him on Google Plus, and we'll make sure and put some links on here so that you can find him easily. All right, are there any? I think that's all the sponsors. Let me tell you a little bit about what it is that we're going to be doing. This is a four-part series, and it came out of about 6 weeks or so ago, I think it was, Stephanie, that you were on, and we talked about finance, and there was just so much, and our good friend Andy Lyons, I ran into her at a Hurl, and she said, you really got to spend more time with that. You really need to flush that out more and have Stephanie back. And so I got back in touch with Stephanie, and so this has actually been brewing in the back of our minds now for a little while. And so what we wanted to do was make sure that we did a deeper dive into finance for entrepreneurs and help people understand, where does their money come from, what can you do to hold on to it, how can you get more of it, all of that good stuff. So we're going to do this in a four-part series. This is part one of the four. So today we're going to be talking about budgeting. We also have coming up, I think, is it next week, we're talking about debt and credit? Yes, I think so.
I'll have to look at the schedule. I
have to look. Okay, I didn't get that far. So we've got debt and credit coming.
Yeah, either crowdfunding or debt and credit. One or the other.
Right, and I know the last one is all about venture financing and venture capital. So we're going to be talking about those four things: budgeting, debt and credit, crowdfunding, and venture capital. So those are the four areas that we're going to be talking about. We will be getting into a lot of depth with those and getting very granular. So I want everybody to please post your comments, let us know what questions you have, and we'll make sure that we get those addressed. And as a special offer for what we're going to be doing, we are offering to put this wonderful thing together for you into some transcripts, some timestamps, and actually the worksheets that we're going to be talking about, and it will be downloadable in kind of an ebook format. I'm not going to call this is not we're not published authors or doing anything like that. We're just putting it all together for you so that it's nice and easy for you to use as a reference. So what I'm asking everybody to do is to just go into the audience and just say, hey, send me the book. And just leave that message there, and then we'll connect with you and make sure that we get your information and your email address and all of that, and then we'll send it to you. So just a heads up, we obviously, if you have to wait for the whole four series to be done, and then we're going to have it all put together, so it would make a lovely Christmas present. So, for the entrepreneur who has everything, this will make a great Christmas present. But I don't think it'll be something that you'll have necessarily tomorrow. So just be forewarned on the timing with that. So let's get into today. Today we're talking about budgeting. And it was funny, well, it's not funny, but I was just watching one of David Leopold's shows earlier today, and they were talking so much about discipline. And I really think budgeting is a very, very key part of disciplining and making sure that you understand where your money is coming from and that you're keeping a watchful eye and setting a plan and a path for how you're going to get to from where you are right now to where it is that you want to be as a successful entrepreneur. So I will stop talking here in just a second and let Stephanie introduce herself, and also Dr. Manuel St. Victor, Dr. Manny, on there, and he is volunteered to be a bit of our case subject for today so that we have a real entrepreneur business person that we can actually reference and talk to, and you can see where he gets frustrated and kind of what his challenges are so that you guys realize that what we're talking about, it's actually real. So Stephanie, I'm going to let you introduce yourself so I can stop talking.
Sure, no worries. Thank you, Carmen, so much for having me on. And yeah, I'm really excited about this series. I think after the reaction that we had to the first show we did together, we discovered that there were a lot of people who had tons of questions, and we thought this might be a really great idea to do a deep dive, like you're talking about, into those particular questions and give everybody a chance to flesh out the type of financing that seems right for them. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Stephanie Sims, and I am the founder of Financeability, which is a way of looking at your business that not only puts you in better stead for getting financing right now, but also helps you build the value of your business over time so that when you're ready to sell, for example, when you want to retire or move on to your, to your next business, you've built the most value that you can. I'm excited to talk about budgeting and really getting your financial house in order today, because regardless of the type of funding you look for in your business, you really have to understand where you are and what resources you personally have available to put into your business first. Because as we all know, nobody is going to build a business 100% with somebody else's money. So until you understand how much you can commit to the adventure, it's going to be hard to convince anybody else that they need to contribute as well. And I'm excited that we've got Manny here today because I know a little bit. I've gotten to know him over the last few weeks, and I know a little bit about what he's trying to do. But I'm excited to see if we can hear more about it and see if there are ways that we can help him get that thing going as quickly as possible.
Excellent. That is exactly what we're trying to do. So I'm going to let Manny, if you could just introduce yourself and just give us a little bit of a background. I know you don't want to, get into all of the details of the business that we're putting together, but give us a little bit of information so that we can get started with that.
Okay, I'm Manny St. Victor. I'm psychiatrically trained cognitive neuroscientist. I left my psychiatry residency after I had enough to be licensed because my passion was not in so much as pathologizing people as understanding what it takes to help people get better through learning how to use their thought processes appropriately. So a couple of years ago, I partnered up with Craig Calvert, and we founded Mindful 360, and we've been doing various psychometric testing to help people understand how they think, how their brains are wired, and I don't even like the word wired, but how they think and what that means as far as social intelligence, what signals they're missing, what signals they're sending to people subconsciously that they're not aware of, and how to use that most effectively.
Hey, Manny, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but for some reason we don't see you, hun. So can I ask you to maybe like go out and come back in and
okay.
See if? And I'm sorry, I don't know why, but we're not able to see you.
Okay, sure, I'll be right back.
No worries. Okay, that was. This is just going to be one of those days. I don't know.
It's okay. Google is challenging us, Carmen. That's what's happening. This is a challenge. We just need to see this as an opportunity for excellence, right?
Absolutely. I like the way you think. So we're just going to roll with it. So let's start with this. Tell us, why is having your personal budget together, why is that such an important first step while we're trying to work Manny out?
Okay, I think that understanding where you are personally is very important, because on one hand it helps you understand, like I mentioned, how much money and resources you have to commit to your business. But I think the second reason it's so important is because ultimately your business is an extension of you, and you need to understand how much risk you're going to be taking on in your business based on where you are financially in your life. So let's think about it this way. For example, I've got 3 kids who are young. And so one of the key things for me is I want to make sure that I can pay for my kids' college education. And when I'm looking at a business, I know that I have savings that I've set aside for my kids' education, but because it's important for me to make sure that they get that, I'm not going to consider that something I could invest in my business. Whereas somebody, for example, who has a ton of savings but doesn't necessarily have that particular project going on, they may say, well, that savings is something I can tap into to run my business. So, you know, making it very personal, you've got to figure out what your priorities are, what your core values are, right, Manny?
Yep.
And we'll get to that later. And then you have to make sure that the decisions you're making in your business match up with that.
Very good. All right, Manny's back. Did you want to finish anything, Manny? I think we probably heard you, but just didn't see you. So if there's anything that you wanted to add, feel free.
Yeah, so the main thing is my goal is to create an environment in which people can get a better idea of what they're communicating to other people and sort of when they're rubbing people the wrong way and why, because I see a lot of people miss business deals because of an email confusion and they don't even realize what ticked this person off or whatever. I've seen people meet people that they should get along with just fine, but they come at the person at a particular angle and the other person comes at a different angle and their values are not aligned. So the concept of core value alignment is realizing when someone is using different words than you to mean sort of the same thing, when you guys are kind of in parallel semantic space talking at each other instead of to each other.
That is excellent, excellent, excellent information. I know I've made that mistake, I don't know how many times. You know, I made the mistake early in my career of emailing stuff when I should have been speaking to people rather than emailing it. So you taking that a step further in what you do is just genius. I'm so excited for that. So okay, let's get into this a little bit. Stephanie, what is the first step that we need to consider here?
Okay, well, the first step that we need to do is to understand what assets are just things that you own that have value, and what liabilities, that's where you owe somebody else money, you have as an individual. So you need to have a good handle on what you have of value. So for a lot of us, this could be our house, this could be our cars, this could be our savings accounts. We might have some retirement accounts like 401ks, IRAs.
Talented children?
I'm sorry?
Talented 10-year-olds?
No, we can't use
Wrong country, wrong country. Carry on, carry on.
You have to be 18 before you can use that, before you can make any money off of it.
I grew up in Haiti, you know, but carry on.
And so once we understand what we have of value, then we need to look at how much money we owe and how we're going to get rid of that debt, if you will, before we take on kind of another big project, which would be investing in our business. Now, debt is not all the same, right? If you have a mortgage on your house, that's probably not something you have to worry about trying to pay off before you start your business. But if you have a high level of credit card debt, which is a lot more expensive than a mortgage in terms of how much you pay in interest and fees, you're probably going to want to get that down to a minimum before you go into a business situation where you're going to need to invest a lot of money in the business. Because what you don't want to do is you don't want to be worried at the same time about, oh my gosh, I didn't make any sales in my company and I don't know how to pay my bills. Those two things are probably going to be too stressful. I don't know, Manny, what do you think?
Yeah, either directly or indirectly, because whereas I tend to not stress as much, you got to consider your partner. And my wife is more of a grounded person where she likes everything gridded out. Like, yeah. So, yeah, it would be stressful.
Right.
Well, and I certainly think also, Manny, wouldn't that change your approach in dealing with the people that you need to create relationships with? If you are focused on, you know, the dollars that you need to make, then that comes across in your delivery rather than in starting a relationship. So having a budget would at least let your mind rest a little bit that you've got it figured out so that it's not coming across so urgently chasing dollars.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, and I think you hit on an important point there, Carmen. One of the most important things you can do in your business is take out all the nasty surprises that you can, right? Take out all the potential bad outcomes that you can out of the equation, because life and business is going to throw plenty at you. There's going to be the client that says yes and then calls you back 2 days later and says, oh, in fact, I changed my mind. Or there's going to be the vendor who told you it would cost $10 and now it costs $100. Those things you can't really control. However, getting yourself into a position where you're comfortable with, I can cover my monthly bills, even if the company doesn't make money for the first 6 months, that makes a big difference, because that you can control.
Okay.
Right?
So I think will we give them? Do you have like a worksheet or like, you know what I mean, like one of the monthly budget summaries that just takes all of your, you know, your income and your bills and just lines it out? Is that what you're talking about? That they need to kind of go through that?
Right. And I think the best way to approach it is on kind of a monthly basis, because that's usually how people. That's about as often as you can stand to analyze things, if you see what I mean. And so if you set everything up on a monthly basis, for example, I know that in a given month, to continue to live the life that I live now, it costs me $5,000 or $10,000 or whatever. Then what you can say is, here's how long I have. What that does is kind of gives you a runway to say, here's how long I have until the business has to start making money, because I've run out of all the money that I was willing to invest. Right?
So,
I'm gonna have to.
So what about people that may be thinking about jumping into entrepreneurship and maybe they don't have that lump sum set up in advance? You know, I mean, you're talking about if we say, you know, I've got, let's just for ease of numbers say, you know, it's $5,000 a month. I'm going to give myself 6 months. That's $30,000. If I don't have $30,000, then what do I do?
Well, do you have a job right now? because if you actually are, if you already have bills of $5,000 a month and you can't pay them now, entrepreneurship may not be the right choice for right this second.
Well, I meant if I don't have it squirreled away somewhere. Like I might be paying my bills now. Like, you know, maybe I make, you know, $35,000 in the 6 months. You know, so I don't have the 30,000 in a nice little nest egg someplace.
Right. Well, I think that there's a couple of ways to approach the situation. One is to say, I'm going to keep working at my job until I can save up a cushion, right, so that it lets me do that. Or I'm going to go through the $5,000 I spend a month, and I'm going to decide that I can cut $750 out of that, so that I reduce how much it costs me to keep living, if you will, and I limit the amount that I actually have to have before I can start my business.
Gotcha. Yeah. And one other question, and we'll move on to what I guess would be kind of step 2. I know that there is you mentioned the term assets, and I've heard that term defined in different ways. You know, I know I've read some of the things that Rich Dad put out about assets and all of that. So what are we when you're talking about assets, specifically what things, you know, you mentioned like houses. So is for, you know, again, Rich Dad wouldn't necessarily call a house an asset under certain circumstances and all of that. Your car, your, you know, so what things in a typical situation would we be listing off as assets for this purpose?
Well, I think that when you're looking at what's called your personal net worth, right? So it means when I look at what I own as an individual and what I owe as an individual, you would count all of that, okay? Because it's an asset, right? It's something that you could turn into cash. Basically, the definition of an asset is something that you could turn into cash.
Right.
Now,
even if you took a loss on it, because, you know, his point was, you know, if you own a house and say you're upside down in it, or your car and you're upside down in it, theoretically I could sell those things. But if I took a loss on them, are they really then still an asset?
Well, I mean, once you sell it, no. But at the point in time where you understand what you have that has value to somebody else, then you can make a decision of what is it I'm willing to part with to get cash I need. Because that's really the second step is, okay, I have all these things that have value to somebody else, Am I willing to sell any of them to raise, for example, this $30,000 nest egg that we were talking about? You know, maybe your decision to start your business is we have 2 cars and we're willing to do without a second car so that I can start my business. You know, so I go and sell my car and maybe I get $15,000 out of my car and that starts my nest egg. You know, that's how I do it. Another option, the reason it's nice to know about your assets is because another option that we'll cover in the debt show is that you can actually borrow against your personal assets. You can. I don't necessarily think it's a good thing for everybody, but you can do it. And so again, it opens your options and it helps you understand really what you have to play with. Think of it like a toolbox, right? You want to see all the tools you have before you start saying, I'm going to use a hammer to try to take a screw out of the wall, right? You want to make sure you've got the right tool. And so you need to know what your tools are and what they do.
Right. So I definitely think that's a great first step, is understanding your own personal net worth and your own personal asset base and all of that, so that you can move forward with the next steps. If you don't understand that, it's very, very hard to accurately deal with debt and credit. Certainly, if you were to get as far as the venture capital route, having your own personal finances in order would be, absolutely essential before you ever knocked on that door. So, what would be step 2? Go for it.
Well, I think that step 2 is that you need to understand what it is your business is going to do. Okay, so it sounds really simple, but you need to think about it in terms of dollars and cents instead of thinking of I'm going to create this really cool product. You need to try to break it down a little more so you understand how that's going to bring money in. So here's where I'd like to talk to Manny a little bit, and maybe we can see how this works, right? First, Manny, talk to us about what it is that you're going to offer that people would be able to buy. So is it a service? Is it a product? Is it a membership? What is it?
Initially, it's a 6-week course that introduces you to core values and values that other people have that you probably had not thought of, and gives you a deeper understanding of it.
Okay, so there's some courses.
Okay, so is it membership based, or is it like a fee, a one-time upfront fee, or how does it, what's the engine that turns the revenue?
Yeah, the initial model I was looking at was a one-time fee to have access to the course. Okay. And it'll be like a 6-week course. We anticipated that after people developed an understanding of how the values work and how important they are to motivation, and how much damage you can prevent and how much more efficient you can be communicating, that we would create as a service, software as a service, where the person could put in copy or put in whatever elements and have it run through, and it would be evaluated to see if it was communicating effectively to all the different psychographics.
Okay. And that, probably that second piece, the SaaS piece, would be a membership based, right? Like they would pay $12 a month or something like that, $20 a month, I don't know what it is. But yeah, that would be more of a fixed, a permanent revenue stream, if you will, as opposed to the courses, where essentially what they do in the courses, they pay you once and then they have access and that's it.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Because once you realize how important core values are, you just don't want to risk you don't want to communicate without them. So it's worth itself over, several times over.
Okay. Okay. So I like the fact that you've got 2 pieces, right? You've got a piece where you get, a decent chunk of money up front, but then you've got a place where they can continue to interact with you, and that gives you, a lot of people call it a passive income stream. I don't really like the word passive because you're clearly working to provide value for those people, but a steady income stream is how we could look at it. Yeah. So that's a really attractive mix, as opposed to, having to constantly rely on new sales each time to generate revenue. What you're doing is you're establishing a relationship with the client where you say, here's what you pay up front, and then you stay with me. Basically you turn someone into a client for life. So yeah, that's always great.
Yeah. Now, one thing worth noting is that the psychographic that I'm going towards specifically is a lot of my medical colleagues are dying to get out of medicine. And with core values, once you get some clarity on that, you realize where you need to be going. And based off that, one of the first barriers we run into is the jargon barrier, the jargon barrier, where we talk like someone who spent 30 years learning to use words that cause headaches. And so sort of teaching people what the signal they're sending is, teaching them the empathy to hear what someone else is saying without automatically going into doctor mode. So that was my first target psychographic.
Okay. And so the good news is, at least from a business perspective, and I think from all perspectives, is that's a demographic where the key factor is not finding the money for purchasing, it's feeling comfortable with the value of what they're purchasing. Is that a fair assessment of those people?
Yeah.
Okay.
They got money, they just don't have happy.
Right. Well, and it sounds like it's pretty acute, the lack of happy.
Okay. Yeah, it's like every morning when your alarm goes off at 5 in the morning, you're like, if only I could get out. And I've had several friends who, as I made my way out, were like, dude, send back a rope, please.
Okay.
So.
Okay. So I love the way that you've got a very specific target market and you understand a way not only to get them to buy something up front, but to keep them going. That's great. How many people like that are there, do you think? How big, this is the next question people always ask, is how big is your potential market? They're
saying 50% of physicians are trying to get the heck out. People that I know directly who would buy it, I'd say 10 right off that, cats I went to Harvard with who were like, dude, whatever, I'll pay whatever, just to get me out. And then they have friends as well. It's the general sentiment is, when I told folks I was heading out and gonna try it out, I had been doing software engineering since I was 10 years old. So I was able to come out, build virtual worlds, build software while Craig and I got the company started. But most people, their first response is, if I could get out, I would. Yeah. Now, not most people, but a lot of my colleagues are like, if there was something that would allow me to maintain a lifestyle not too far worse than doctor lifestyle, yet get my life back and not have to deal with the paperwork, the 24-hour calls every 3 days, they would do it.
Okay. Okay. So, and this is something that would translate to other highly paid professions, for example.
Yeah.
Are there other?
I know lots of lawyers who are like, Manny, if it works, send me a copy and I'll figure it out.
Investment bankers, for example.
Yeah. I've got 2 investment banker friends who like launched a video game company because they were over it. So.
Right. Okay. So the good news is now, what you'll want to do to make sure that you've got this sanity check on your projections, on your budget, is you're going to want to get a number. You're going to want to say, in the U.S., for example, there's, 250,000 physicians, and there's 800,000 lawyers, and there's, 50,000 investment bankers, whatever. My potential market is this big, say it's 1 million people. I think it's probably bigger, but whatever, let's go with that, it's a round number. And then what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to make sure that as you project your sales, when you're going to sell the first course and how you're going to get these people into the membership, you get to a reasonable percentage of those people, but you can't ever say, yes, I'm going to sell it to all of them, for example. If you project there's 1 million people and I'm going to sell it to 1 million, pretty much any investor or anybody else who looks at your projections are going to be like, well, you're dreaming. That's just not possible.
Okay.
So you want to use, go ahead.
And I'm sorry, Stephanie, just a question. I'm trying to think of the term I've heard of describing that. I don't know if it's the backward pass or the forward pass, whatever. But I've also heard of that can be a trick. I mean, there's always pluses and minuses to any way that you would value things. But looking at it from that way, taking the market, that's huge, and then saying okay, and then bringing it back down. Versus doing, for example, if Manny knows that he has himself, his wife, XYZ people that are committed to X amount of hours a day, they can reach, with the tools that we have, we can reach through, however many individuals, and going the other way. You see what I'm saying? So that you're actually going up the ladder rather than and then determining what is the market there. So if I've got, 5 people working with me on this project at varying levels of involvement, and at the end of the day we feel like in every month we could probably contact 50 people or say whatever, and then out of those 50 people we would expect that 10% of those 50 are going to make it to step 2, and then we break it down that way, and then we end up with a number versus taking this overriding number and coming down the other way.
Right, and I think that's an excellent point, Carmen. That's what I was saying with the whole notion of a sanity check. What you
Okay.
don't want to say, that this is, Guy Kawasaki has done this talk, and I'm sure lots of other people have
That's
as
where I
well,
got it from.
which is 3% of 5 million is not a sales projection. You know, well, I can get 3% of the market. You know, a very small percentage of a very huge market is not a sales projection. You're exactly right. What you need to do is you need to build it as you're going to sell it. So like you said, Manny, you know 10 people. Well, what I would do is I would build your projection and say, okay, I'm going to have to talk to these people probably for 2 months before they buy, or, you know, 6 weeks or a day, whatever it is. And you start selling at the moment that you think you can convince some of those 10 people to buy. And then you say to yourself, okay, so of those 10, I think maybe 3 will buy the first time. I'll have to go back to the others and maybe another 2 will buy. And then, you know, kind of build it based on what you really understand of how people are going to get convinced to take your product on. Then you can use some simple rules like, you know, for the first year, I'm going to do no better than doubling my sales every month. And then in the second year, as I've got more money to spend on advertising, maybe I can do better. But, you know, in any case, you know, when you get into a projection mode where you're doubling every month, 1 to 2, you know, I sold 1 product last month and now I'm selling 2. That's not hard to swallow. I sold 1,000 products last month and now I'm selling 2,000. Starts to get a lot harder to swallow. So, you know, there's kind of this choke point where you say that's just not possible. But to me, Carmen's right. You want to build the sales projection as you'll actually sell, and then use that big number we talked about at a certain point to look at what you projected and say, do I really think I could sell 10,000 of these in a month, for example? You know, that's where you use that big number, is just to verify that you haven't gone completely off the rails with the way you've built your projection. Does that make sense?
Yep, it does.
Okay.
All right, we are halfway through the show. Let me just do a couple of housekeeping type items. I've got some people out here in the audience that are certainly wanting to say hi. We definitely want to say hello to Dr. Christopher Vogelman, who is out there listening to us, William Rock. I've seen some great comments with Cheryl. Deuce, you know we love Cheryl. And Ms. Kristen Drysdale. So I definitely say hello to all of you. Thank you so much for watching, and we are so glad to have you with us today. The other thing I wanted to go back and just make sure everybody is aware of, this is episode 1 of 4 of our Show Me the Money series. We are planning to answer one of Cheryl's questions to put all of this information together for you. We're going to take these videos and audios and translate them into transcripts and timestamp them, and then put them in a nice little neat ebook for you guys. So if you're interested in that ebook, all you need to do today is go ahead in the comment stream here on Google+, just put in there, send me the book. And we will make sure that we catch up with you on Google+. If you are listening to this on YouTube or the Compass Network or any place else, just make sure that you're putting it in the comments there, and we will also see it. So just make sure you put that on there, and then we will contact you and get all of the necessary information that we need to set that up. So we have, today's episode is all about budgeting and getting started on the track to entrepreneurial financial success. And so we've just broken down steps kind of 1 and 2 to 2.5 about where we are with all of this. And so I'm going to let Stephanie keep going with this after we're now done with this little bit of housekeeping that we had to do. Got that out of the way. And we'll finish this up. So Stephanie, go ahead.
Okay, thanks, Carmen. Okay, so what we were talking about was really building the first part of our budget or our projection, which is how's the money going to come in? You know, what are we going to sell? So, Manny, do you have any questions about how we want to do that? Does that make sense to you?
It makes sense so far. I'm sure I'll have some questions via chat and stuff. You know that. But
right.
Yeah, I'm good so far.
Right. Okay, and so once we understand where the money comes into our business, right, which is the revenue or the sales number, then we have to think about how much does it cost us for, really, I look at it as 4 different things, okay? In your business, you have to make and deliver your products, okay? So most people call that production, costs of production. You also have to sell. You have to advertise or get your products known. So most people call that sales and marketing. You have to develop new products because obviously these people who've taken your first course, at some point you're going to want to offer them a second course, to help them progress, or maybe you come up with a whole new concept that can really improve what you've already taught them. You're going to offer another course. That's called product development. And then the fourth thing is you actually have to run your business, right? At some point you're probably going to want to have maybe a physical office. You're certainly going to need to do all kinds of things like get yourself insurance, make sure that your website is on a secure hosting environment, any of the things that most people would consider administration, which is usually what that category is called, you also need to include in there. Even though it's not directly related to your product, you're going to have to spend that money. You're going to need a cell phone, right? You're going to have a website. You're going to need to print business cards at some point, and brochures and flyers, and if you go to a conference, that's going to cost you some money. All of those kind of things also need to be included, even though they don't seem directly related to your product. Okay? So if we want to take those one by one, maybe, and we can talk through, the first one is how are you going to make and deliver your product? Now, your case is a little special because it's a course, right? Yeah. So talk to me about how you're going to make the product.
Okay. What I'm anticipating is that I'll be recording the videos for the 6 weeks worth of content, and that'll be one layer. And we've been writing up these scripts for those and the main stuff we want to cover, so we've gotten that done. The second part is we'd want some interactive, brief quiz content so people could at each step know that they understood the material through some introspection.
Okay.
And then the third aspect is we would want ideally that people had some confirmation, some sort of certification that they understood it, some competency testing.
Okay, and that would happen at the end of the 6 weeks?
Yes.
Okay, so you'd have, just make sure I understand, you'd have a video, and in that video there'd be some quizzes, and then there'd be kind of a final exam, if you will, at the end of the 6 weeks?
Yes.
Okay. Just as a completely technical aside, what are you using to do your videos?
We've been using an external camera and just capturing them. Just an external video camera.
Okay, because Camtasia is a pretty decent video editing software that actually will allow you to integrate quizzes while you're editing.
Okay.
I think it costs $300. I mean, it's worth checking out just so you can do it yourself if you want. Now, if you don't want to and you want to hire a video editor, clearly that may be a higher quality. But for the first starting videos, this is what I'm doing. I'm just telling you that this is what I'm doing. So you might check it out.
Okay.
Okay, so if we look at it from the finance standpoint, what you're really investing is maybe a little money because you'll buy Camtasia, something like that. But basically, it's going to be your time. And do you have somebody else working with you?
Craig Calvert. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
And I've been talking to Dr. Vogelman to help me out with some of the aspects of making it more engaging with his Epic Win systems, as well as helping me get the final certification stuff in place.
Okay. So when we talk about what it really costs to make your product, it's not a huge investment, doesn't sound like, of money. It's going to be more an investment of your time. Is that an accurate statement?
Yep.
Okay. So once the videos exist and the certification and the quizzes and all that, where are you going to put them? Are you going to put them on a website?
Yeah, they're going to be on the Core Value Alignment website.
Okay. And so there's really not going to be any ongoing cost associated with the product, because once you put them on the website, they just sit there, right? And people sign up and they see them. And okay.
Yep.
Okay.
And I've purchased the membership engine. I'm using the premise system by the Copy Blogger team, the Authority team. So it allows people to access the videos for a limited amount of time, and you can give them more time, and then they could buy additional membership time.
Right. Okay. So if I look at what we were talking about, which is your production costs, that's going to be pretty small for you.
Yep.
Okay. So let's talk about selling. How are you going to get the word out? How are you going to make sure people know about your product? How are you going to make sure that they can find you? Tell me a little about that.
I was looking in part in doing a standard inbound marketing approach. Just I know a lot of the doctor clubs. I know a lot of physicians who know a lot of miserable people, miserable other physicians. So I've got a pretty big contact list, like some of the guys over at Harvard and some of the guys at Carolina Med, some of the guys over at Duke, Carolina. Basically, I know a lot of the guys that I went to school with, like they've worked their way up to admin where they know a lot of distressed physicians.
Okay.
So.
And is that something that you want to do long term, or is that something that eventually you're going to want to hand off to somebody else? I mean, right now they're your personal contacts.
Yeah.
But
eventually, I'd want to hand that off and have that managed because ideally, I'd be working with people who are thrilled and maybe one-on-one be working with the people who are taking the steps to get out and to be living a more fulfilling, complete life, or being more empathic to their patients. But either way, ideally, I wouldn't be on the sales end, just constantly dealing with disgruntled physicians. It's not really a happy place.
Okay. Okay. So it sounds like again you're going to be kind of lean, at least to start with, on the advertising, sales, and marketing budget. I mean, are you thinking about doing any conferences? Are you going to try to go to some networking events or stuff like that?
Oh yeah. Ideally, I would go to like any medical conference because half of what we do at the medical conference is talk about how if we could leave, we would. So to me, that's a perfect place because any medical conference, about a quarter of the people are sitting there actively complaining about paperwork, and yeah.
Okay, so something you'd want to include in your budget is however many conferences you're going to do a year.
Okay.
Say you do, I don't know, say you do one every other month, 6 conferences a year, and I don't know how much it costs to actually participate in the conference. I don't know what the fees are, but if it's a weekend kind of thing, it's probably going to cost you at least $1,500 by the time you travel and you get a hotel and all that. Okay.
Yeah, they're up there. Okay. Talking a few thousand before travel. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So you're probably going to need to budget maybe, I don't know, $7,500 per conference.
Yeah. Ballpark.
Yeah, budget on the high side, and then look at your years-long budget, and divide it by 12 so that you kind of consider that your monthly conference fee, your monthly budget. And the only other thing I would think about is, when you go to the conferences, you're going to have some kind of, you're going to want to have business cards, you're going to want to have a brochure, you're going to want to have some kind of printed materials. So I'd probably put, I don't know, somewhere between $2,000 and $3,000 in your budget by the time you pay for design and you pay to have them printed. It's better. Again, my theory on budget, this, Manny and I have had plenty of discussions about this. I'm risk averse, and so my perspective is always budget more than you think it's going to cost. That way you won't be disappointed.
Yeah.
And save money, you can feel good about it. As opposed to budgeting, I think I can get it for $50, and then all of a sudden it comes in at $150 and it blows your budget, and you're in big trouble. So. But yeah, I mean, other than that, it doesn't sound like you're going to have a ton of marketing costs either. Down the line, you're going to want to think about probably doing, some ads on social media and things like that. But it sounds like that's going to be at least, a year out. So you can probably wait until you're generating some revenue to start spending that kind of money. So you'll see that it's just.
I was going to jump in as the marketer in the room and just say, eventually, even if that list is big and that initial pool of people is very, very deep, it does have a floor. You know what I mean? And so you will, at some point in time, need to consider where will new people come from.
Okay.
What engine of growth will you use? How will you go out and attract people that you don't know, that didn't go to Harvard? Obviously, we like Harvard people here, but it's a whole lot of people who didn't go to Harvard.
Yeah.
So.
I've got people at various colleges. We met at early pre-med conferences, and another strategy is various times over the 20 years of training, they do the thing where they say to you, if you're not sure this is what you want, then get out. But there's a certain mindset that I think that by stepping further into the line, like maybe my freshman year or maybe my third year pre-med or whatever, there's various points going down the line that if you can get people to do some real introspection, then they would realize that maybe they're doing it for the wrong reasons and save them a lot of headache and heartache.
Mm-hmm. Very good points. Very, very good point. We got about 15 more minutes left. So just to make sure that we are getting through all of what Manny's going to need, or anybody else that would be going through this, I don't want to rush you, but if we could make sure that we get to those points, what's left?
Well, really what we've got left is product development and then kind of general and administrative expenses. But I wanted to ask you, Carmen, if somebody's looking at kind of a social media marketing blitz, for lack of a better word, somebody's out there and they're like, okay, so I'm ready, my product's ready, but nobody knows who I am. What kind of money should they expect to spend on that? And what kind of return do you think they could get from it?
Wow, that's a loaded question. Um, First, I would say expect to spend. A lot of people think that social media is free. You can just put up a Facebook page and a Twitter page, and you can just go to town on it. And the problem that most people find is that social media is free. That's not untrue. But to do it well takes a lot of time. Understanding the language, the kind of the terminology and how each one of those things work is rather time consuming. And if you're an entrepreneur, you have other things to do with your time. I mean, for me, who does this for a living, we've got a lot of the tools and a lot of that background knowledge, and we've been burnt a few times, doing things that didn't work, and we can save you a lot of time and put a better presentation out there when it's all said and done. Rather than have you entrepreneur, we have people all the time, whether if you're a plumber or an electrician or a doctor, like they said, that knows doctor speak but really can't do, I don't know how a doctor would use, if you're thinking doctor speak, that would be really hard to put into Twitter. I don't. You get 140 characters. And
First medication name, diagnosis.
right. So hiring a professional definitely does have dividends, and there is value in that. The catch sometimes is that it's not always something that's tangible. Having a better brand image and furthering all of that is not always something that comes in something that you can itemize and count. And that's a tough thing. So, and everybody charges a different amount. There's a wide range. You could go. I hate to talk about Fiverr, but Fiverr is an option. There are good people on Fiverr. Fiverr costs $5. But it's a little bit risky. Just as there are good people on there, there are people who are not as professional on there as well. And so that's a bit of a risk that you take. But that would be on the low end of the price curve, not necessarily quality, not knocking anybody, but it would be on the low end of the price curve. And then on the high end of it, you have people, that can charge thousands of dollars, per month to manage your social media. It just depends on who you're targeting, what you're looking for, all of that good stuff. But I would just suggest to anybody that's considering going the professional route to consider, that it's not always about cash dollars. You can get marketing services. For example, if you find the perfect marketing person and they say, okay, it's $350 a month, and you say, gosh, I've got $250. How do we work with this? Go out and find another business person that you can team up with and go back to that marketing person and say, hey, I've got two. If I brought you two people, if both of us came in, what can you do for us? And you can then get it into your budget that way. Because marketing people, we like a good deal too. So I would rather take, two clients on at, maybe a slightly lower price for each of those than, to lose the one client and lose out altogether. I know we've worked out some arrangements with people where we, use our logo in some strategic places with them, so that we're actually furthering our brand by being associated with them, and so we charge them a slightly lower price. So don't get scared away and don't run, and say, I'll just get my cousin's uncle's nephew to run my social media for me, because that usually doesn't work so well. So I'm off my soapbox. Sorry.
No, that's good. And the one question that I do have for you, because this is something I'm asking myself, right, as an owner, is at what point do you say, now I need help? In other words, I think that as an owner, sometimes social media can help you refine your ideal client when you do it yourself, because what you do is you see how people react to you. But then at a certain point, it's not trying to get feedback that you're doing with social media, it's really just trying to get the word out. So kind of how do you know when you're at that point? You know, is it when you have a product ready, or is it, you know, when?
So your question is, when are you ready to pay? When should you consider paying a professional?
Right.
When you're ready to start getting money coming in.
Oh, okay.
I mean, that at the end of the day, that's the honest truth. When you are at a point where you are looking, you're selling something you are needing your social media to help drive your marketing and your revenue. That's at the point at which I would definitely say you need to get, at least consider a professional. You would definitely want to start talking about that. And again, it's partly because you've got other things to do. I mean, for you as, an investment specialist, you don't want to spend your whole day running analytics and, managing Hootsuite and all of that fun stuff to get that social media message out. So you want that engine to turn, but you don't want to have to be the one cranking the wheel all the time. And that's the point at which I would consider getting a professional. But do what you can now. Don't wait until you have a project or a product ready to start building it. Do what you know now. If you know Facebook, I know that's like the forbidden word on here. But if you know Facebook, do it now. Start using it. Start building that base camp of people, and get even better at it. And then come back over here to Google Plus, start working that out, start building that network too. And then when your business gets to the point where, like I said, you need to devote your attention elsewhere, you need to crank the marketing on this side, then you can get somebody else to come in. But now you've got a Facebook base, you've got a Google Plus base, now you can pay someone to get involved with your Twitter and your Instagram and your, all your other stuff, your Pinterest and your LinkedIn accounts and and your content. That's another key thing that people often overlook in terms of your social media, is the role that content plays in that. So doing that would be the wise thing to do. And we could do a whole nother show, probably a whole nother 4-part series on that. So I'm going to taper that off and let you get back to Manny.
Well, but you need to take notes on that, because I think that's another place where, we could all use help as owners. I mean, at least I know I can. So, okay. So that basically, to bring us back to what we were doing, that takes us through the sales and marketing part of our expenses, right? So I like Carmen's philosophy there. You need to expect to pay something. It will not be free. And that is something you always need to keep in your head as you're going through your business. I know we all think, I don't have any money, I can't pay for that. The truth is, in your business, just like in life, there's no free lunch, right? And so at a certain point, you have to say to yourself, my time as an entrepreneur is valuable and needs to be devoted to, like Manny said, I don't want to spend my time selling. I want to spend my time developing new products or helping people individually. That's where you're going to add the most value. And you need to recognize that to be able to give the most value to your clients, you're going to have to pay somebody else maybe to handle those other aspects of your business. So, don't go into it thinking I can do this all myself, and this is me, the pot, calling everybody else black. I get that, because I do this myself. I always, always, always say, well, I could probably do that myself. I don't think I need anyone for that. But you cannot run your business that way. You have to get to a point where you're like, this is what I want to focus on, and this is how much I have to spend to get this piece done. That's where the budget helps you. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so super quick, we talked about making new products kind of at the beginning, Manny. And so it sounds like in your case, making a new product is really going to be very little outside expense, maybe some video editing, but mainly it's going to be your time. So again, it's not going to be a huge amount of money that you'll have to invest on that.
Okay.
The last element, though, is the administrative part, okay? And this is stuff like cell phones, office rent, web hosting fees. Think about all the different little things you're going to pay for. I don't know, there's a lot of people I think that are using Wave. Well, if you're using Wave, it's free, but you may be using QuickBooks Online to do your accounting. There's a small fee, but it's a fee associated with that every month. If you buy 4 things that cost $25 per month, that's $100 a month. So you need to make sure that you include that, because at the beginning, $100 a month can actually make a big difference. Once you're cranking and you're making the big bucks, no, it won't be a big deal. But you want to make sure at the beginning that you don't end up panicking because you forgot to add in all these little expenses. Okay?
And I'm sorry, Stephanie, I don't mean to jump in there, but would you you and I were in the green room, we were talking about the difference between having, vendors versus staff, and kind of the hidden cost there with having staff. So could you dive into that real quick?
Yeah, and that's a good point. Thanks for reminding me about that. One thing that we haven't really talked about, because we're all kind of talking as solopreneurs, I think, but once you start taking on people to help you, there are a couple ways to do that, and you need to be really conscious of how you want to do it. There's nothing wrong with having full-time employees, but you need to understand that as an employer, your exposure, your cost isn't just that person's salary, okay? Because as an employer, what you'll have to do is you'll have to pay some federal taxes, basically, that happen that are to cover Social Security, Medicare, and unemployment, and that amounts to about 7.5% of the person's salary. So off the bat, if you pay someone $100,000, it's actually going to cost you $107,000. Plus, if you have any state unemployment, which most states do, you'll add, maybe a percentage point there. And in most cases, to attract employees, you're going to have some kind of benefits. So whether it's a subsidy towards their health insurance, or you pay part of their cell phone, or you give them a gas allowance. Generally speaking, if you're going to have employees, I suggest you estimate between 10 and 15% over and above their salary as what it's going to cost you to have them on payroll. Okay, so that would mean if you pay someone $100,000, you're gonna budget $115,000 for that person. Okay, the option is to work with people on what's called a contract basis, which means they're not an actual employee of your company. They simply send you an invoice every month and say, here's what my services were for this period. Okay, you have to be pretty careful about this, because the IRS saw that this was happening to a lot of people who were actually full-time employees, and they were just being put on a contract to avoid having to pay the tax by the employer. If the person really works for you full-time and they really only work for you, then they're your employee. You're not going to be able to pay them on contract. A contract arrangement, though, is nice for a company that's starting, because then you can work with someone, say a virtual assistant, who actually has other clients and really owns their own business, and so they work for you maybe 10 hours a month. That's what an independent contractor is, and that's where it makes sense to have them simply invoice you for the time that they spend on your project, and it helps you save that 10 to 15% because they're not an employee. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. Great.
And as you're talking, maybe some developers work this way as well, but again, you have to be careful. If they really work for you full time and long term, they're your employee. If they're on a 3-month project and they work for you full time for 3 months and then they're gone, then you're probably okay to treat them as a contractor.
Yeah, that is absolutely excellent advice. And I hate to cut you guys off, but I actually have to hop over. I'm being zapped today by by our good friend Zara. So we are going to run this off. I wanted to thank both of you again. Manny, I appreciate your time. I know getting you on screen, we're seeing a lot more of you, and I just love you for coming on. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me on, Carmen. I appreciate it. And thanks for helping me out.
But you bet. It was my pleasure. And thanks so much, Carmen, for doing this. And of course, if anyone leaves comments in the event stream, we'll get back to them as soon as we can and give you as many answers as we can.
Absolutely. So make sure that you guys look out for the invitation for next week's show. I did not get a chance to look it up, but I'm pretty sure, I don't know, I'm not even going to say that. It's either debt or it's crowdfunding. We got that twisted around. But it's going to be good no matter what. Whether we talk about debt or whether we talk about crowdfunding, it's all going to be good. It's going to be about money, how to get it, how to hold on to it, how to make more of it. So make sure you look for that next week. Thank you again to Mike Alton and the Social Hat for being sponsors for us. And we will look forward to seeing everybody next week. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.